Bioware, man, you had one job. One. You just wanted a Dragon Age game. You literally just wanted a Dragon Age game. What happened? You know, while playing this game, I thought to myself, Bioware had everything going for them. They had a massive fan base, insane amount of time, 10 years I'm talking, a solid story. Hell, they even had EA of all people backing them up, throwing money at them. Essentially a blank check, really. Yet somehow they managed to throw it all away in an attempt to soft reset the entire lore, I guess. But whatever it is, I bring you my review after 2 full playthroughs, one as a fighter and one as a mage, of Dragon Age The Veilguard. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe for more content. Let's roll on with the video. So I'm going to be doing quite a few reviews going on to the future. In my reviews, it's going to break down everything in a grade-like format out of 100 points or 100%. 30 points will go towards gameplay, 20 points for the story, 15 points for visuals and art, 10 points for audio, 10 more points for technical performance, 10 points for innovation, and then lastly we end off with 5 points for player engagement and community. Okay, so combat and gameplay. Let's start with the pros. It's easy to pick up and start playing. They went with an action combat route, and I guess that's like their way of incorporating some God of War and Mass Effect. You have your traditional yet effective hack and slash mechanics such as light attacks, heavy attacks, block, parry, a few skills, and an ultimate with some other, elements spring in between. There are 3 classes to choose from, which gives a little bit of a versatility when playing this game, being a mage, a fighter, and a rogue. Builds are possible in this game through both gear and variety of perks or skill points. More on that later. There's a variety of difficulties to choose from, as well as a custom difficulty mode that allows you to essentially tailor all the numbers aspects of the combat. Your character goes up to a max level of 50, which is a big improvement from the usual caps in other Dragon Age games. I believe they used to cap at maybe 20 or 30. Then there's also a solid amount of loot in the game, and can sometimes feel rewarding when you get the gear that complements the theme or build you were going for. Now we move on to the cons, and boy is there a lot of them. I'm sorry if I rage quit at some point during this review because it really soured my taste for RPGs in general. Starting with, the game effectively masks its combat with huge, bright colors, numbers, and massive explosions, and over-the-top skills to hide the simplicity in its combat as well as its repetitiveness. Don't get me wrong, it is beautiful. The colors that they use, the color palette, it looks nice and will oftentimes come off as a game that looks great to play. But when you get it into your hands, after the 10th to 12th to 15th hour, you start to notice the repetition in the game over and over again, and you start to realize how few things you can actually do. And trust me, when I say over-the-top skills, I really mean it. Your character is a fighter that brings swords from the heavens on your enemies, summoning spectral giant hammers to swing repeatedly, smashing the ground with your bare hands like the Incredible Hulk, lightning bolts out of your bare hands as a rogue, mages are summoning meteors at level 3, rogues are throwing down machine gun turrets, and the funniest part of all this is that the enemies are absolute bullet sponges. So you are spamming these abilities for most of the game because you do not get to one-shot these enemies until far into the late game. So here you are summoning swords from the sky as a fighter 10 times per battle. I swear every class in the game feels like mages, which unfortunately hurts the lore of this game tremendously. Dragon Age Inquisition had a solid, fair balance of flashy combat without going overboard. But this, it truly feels like an MMORPG. It's like going from Skyrim to Elder Scrolls Online, except, well, at least that one marketed itself as such. Now, don't get me wrong, this will sometimes be okay in certain instances because everyone likes to feel really overpowered at the end of the game. They like to have those big skills, those large skills, and whatever the case may be. But whatever happened to simple skills first and then gradually grow in power levels? No, this game says screw all that. So what ends up happening is you have nothing to look forward to at the end. It also makes the enemies look pathetic as you are blowing up everything in the area like a Dynasty Warriors game. Now when I say this game is repetitive, I mean that fully, man. This game is incredibly repetitive because it relies only on combat. There's no talking your way out of a situation. There's no persuasion systems. There's no way of sneaking out of a situation because the enemies literally appear out of thin air, and all of the abilities in this game are explosions. I mean, come on, man. How is it that Baldur's Gate came and took all these systems from them like it was nothing? You like crafting stuff? Cool, because this game got rid of all of that as well. There's just green pots everywhere for your health potions now. No, like seriously, there are actual green health pots, like pots that you crack open to get a potion back. All of the ability to create potions like elixirs and buffs and all those things like that are all gone. Upgrading weapons feel very weird because you have to depend on finding the duplicate of the weapon you have in the chest littered all around the different zones. So these chests are literally hidden in certain places or zones that you can never go back to again because the game is zone based. So you will be completely asked out if a piece of gear that you wanted that had a legendary attribute for is no longer attainable. While the build crafting can be nice during the end game, it is horrible in the beginning since you can end up with random pieces of gear everywhere without any stats on them. Couple that with a skill system that has plenty of MMO style perks or stats increases, which only become substantial late game. It gets worse based on the class that you pick too. I played the mage, which quite literally feels terrible to play early on. I played on the hardest difficulty and it was just incredibly boring since 99% of the time was spent running away or dodging since your companions are not very prevalent in combat. Every enemy focuses you. The fighter is the opposite in that you start off incredibly strong with a good block and the ability to parry effectively, but then late game you spend tons of time whacking at one enemy for minutes until they die. The rogue sits somewhere in between the two. I watched my brother play it and I saw how it worked and stuff like that. It seems like they have a more streamlined balance of how the game was supposed to operate in terms of power levels. As for the companions, they stripped the companions entirely of every bit of agency they had. I mean, literally in every way possible, to the point where they just feel like an additional skills or that go on cooldown. The worst part about it is they get 3 skills. You can't even use all 3 skills at the same time. When you use one skill, it literally puts all 3 skills on cooldown. They are barely noticeable and they do not take any damage at all. So they cannot die, they cannot be down, they do not have an HP bar. When you activate a skill, they instantly teleport and use that skill regardless of what they were doing. Like, I don't understand, bro. Can you talk about oversimplification of a game right here? Now, it's funny because I had the liberty of playing Dragon Age 2 again and Dragon Age Origins, and let me tell you something. The way you can customize the AI of your companions down to the exact parameters on when to use what skill is mind-blowing. Or you can even do like if somebody who is using magic is attacking him. So, it really, like, this is amazing, man. Surrounded by at least 4 enemies, he'll use the stealth, and trust me, this thing does it very well. It is an excellent design, and it goes so in depth. I mean, you can make one person specifically target a particular type of person enemy in the area that you guys are fighting in, or you can make them protect an ally specifically under specific circumstances. Even myself, I can even make tactics for myself. I mean, this is great. I don't know why they got rid of this stuff, man, from Dragon Age The Veilguard, man. This is insane. It's crazy. Like they clearly didn't know what they were doing. They clearly didn't know their fan base at all. It takes a complete dump on this system, and they had no choice but to do this because the companions and everything had to be dialed down. They riddled the whole game with massive explosions, fast-paced enemies, 20 enemies running at you, and world-destroying ultimates. So how could they even implement this situation effectively? They can't. This is just horrible gameplay decisions at its core. And so while we're on the topic of strategy, they pretty much got rid of all that too and replaced it with 2 things. Now, the first one is the primer and detonator mechanic. This could have been good. It's basically the combination of one class ability debuff priming the target and another class detonating the debuff with their ability. This would be great again, except they all do the same thing no matter what the primer is. They all make a diamond explosion and some form of damage yet again. I mean, anyone who plays RPGs should be laughing at this because it speaks volumes of the direction they went with this game, man. I tell you, I'm just like absolutely frustrated. The other thing is the resistance and vulnerability system and the idea of every party member, including yourself, having elemental abilities, thereby effectively making everyone a mage of Thetis. Each enemy has one weakness to an element and one resistance to it. So gone are the days of resistances to things like blunt, piercing, and stuff like that, which makes physical damage probably the most overpowered thing in the game, since there are no resistance to it whatsoever. Now, as a mage, you have no physical attacks. So if you decided to be a fire mage and fought the Venatori, or which is a enemy in the game, on the hard difficulty, you'll be spent more than an hour fighting this single target because the freaking resistances are stacked to 90%. Gosh, man, the enemies you fight in this game is recycled over and over again. You'll be blessed with fighting the same Venatori mage or warrior on repeat. They all have masks on and look exactly the same. The Darkspawn have been stripped of their identity with the same 4 enemy types that ironically mirrors the similar attack patterns as the Venatori enemies. The Darkspawn on top of that also look completely awful. They redesigned it and tried to make a story spin on it, but end up looking extremely goofy and ruins the lore almost in its entirety. Then there's Quinaris, a few constructs, and some undead. Now, this will be fine amount of variety, except they all do the same thing and are just essentially reskins of the enemies that you were fighting prior. Bosses also become repetitive, especially the dragons, because they all follow the same pattern with one twist in between, maybe 2 twists if you're lucky. It actually gets sickening, and as a matter of fact, you know what? This combat has gone long enough. I cannot with this. I cannot. This game gets 10 out of the 30 possible points. It is 30% for gameplay. This is a disgrace. Absolutely horrible combat. Alright, on to the story. So the plot takes place after the events of the Dragon Age Inquisition's DLC Trespasser, in which Solus, a companion that you become very close with, turned out to be a villain who reaches his pinnacle of power that was once lost long ago. Solus wants to destroy the Veil, which is essentially a metaphysical barrier that makes it extremely difficult for both mortals and demons to traverse through. It separates the mortal world from what's known as the Fade. It also serves as a prison for tyrannical gods he once faced, named Elganon and Gillinan. Now guys, you will hear your character and your team say these 2 names at least 500 times in the playthrough, to the point where you swear everyone is repeating themselves. As for your character, you play as Rook, a random guy that Varric finds out of nowhere because you did a good deed, which is based on the faction you choose. You are tasked to form or help form a team to stop Solus from destroying the Veil. Now the Veil, if destroyed, plunges the whole world into a chaotic retribution in which pretty much causes demons to run havoc and cause mass casualty, or so they say. The thing is, Solus only wants to bring the elves back to a position of power they were once in, due to feeling responsible for the slavery of the elves with the creation of the Veil that he caused. You and your team end up stopping Solus, but pay the price of releasing the gods he trapped there. However, we pay the price of trapping Solus in there, who canonically is the only way we can stop the villains of that magnitude. Solus is then essentially forced to communicate with us through our head and some level of blood magic that he uses on us to sort of act like Cyberpunk's Johnny Silverhand, where he is talking to you and only you are able to see him, which is essentially important because he is a god just as much as they are, and only he will actually know how to stop them or what their plan of actions are before we end up getting completely destroyed. Pros of the story would be multiple companions to choose from. You know, you get like a really good amount of companions, so at least if you don't like one, you may like the other. Some side quests were interesting, especially the ones that talked about blood magic. Occasional moments were scored okay on a narrative level. Codexes help with lore building and learning about prior events, which is helpful for people who are new to this world. The game has some really good set pieces where the background is firing on all cylinders. While you are on foot doing your thing, fighting your enemies, there are really cool moments that occur, like the dragon terrorizing the city or the large-scale battle in Weishaupt, the home of the Grey Wardens. gods versus gods battles, and the list goes on. I can talk about this all day, but you know, for the sake of this video, just know the background noise is excellent in this game. It's spectacular and it's a absolute treat for the eyes. Finally, the ending part of the game was solid, which had a 6 to 8 hour long sequence of planning and strategy, which strangely made me wonder where the hell was all of this for the other 65 hours of the game. I'm not kidding, guys. If this kind of choices and systems were sprinkled all throughout the game, it would have been so much better. And that's pretty much it for the pros. As for the cons, of all the problems in this game, the story is by far the biggest one, without a doubt. And by story, I mean story and narrative. The plot starts off okay, but falls very flat very quickly due to poor pacing and terrible power trips that make no sense. And when I say power trips, I literally mean power trips. These enemies are literal gods, and at the snap of a finger, they can destroy your entire team without even a thought. Yet, time and time again, they allow us to get away, even though we have no possible way of beating them. Moments such as the siege in Weishaupt, which is a quest that we have to do, where we have to help the wardens with the attack, comes to mind, where we could have easily been destroyed by these gods, yet the plot armor in this game is so thick that we get away anyways. Guys, I understand that this is a video game, but this right here, this makes it hard to get immersed into it. When your story makes absolutely no sense and only power trips everything, it is impossible to get immersed into a game like this. There are awkward moments in the game where plot scales out of nowhere, then suddenly dies down out of nowhere for you to pick flowers with your companion, even though you all agree that time is a precious commodity. Now, Dragon Age games are known for their characters. Anyone who knows Dragon Age games, they know that the characters and their development are some of the most powerful things in gaming. They're known for this interesting shade of gray that each character will have and their motives. Even the villains have specific motives, captivating lore, and you can kind of understand their point of view whenever they explain what it is they're trying to accomplish to you. Villains such as Rendon Howe, Loghain, Calpurnia, Bronca, the Architect, Solus, and the Arishok. Man, the Arishok. Literally, I loved that villain. Immediately comes to mind. Like, Bioware was cooking in the past with these villains, man. Your companions used to have such merit and great story that builds further and organically as the stories goes on. This is the bread and butter of Dragon Age games because it really hammers on the concept to invoke emotion or a feeling of wanting to see what happens next. Now, as for the companions in Veilguard and the villains, well, let's take a look, shall we?
We're going into the Fade, aren't we?
This right here killed this game for me because all of the companions, for the most part, were downright garbage. They have some of the most cringy and corny writing to ever exist in games. I cannot stress this enough that I would sometimes sit down and wonder, what the hell am I really playing? I mean, how did this make it past quality assurance? How?
Gotcha. Oh, people. Where'd you come from?
Bellara Luther. Strife and Eilin sent us to find you.
Wait, didn't you used to be a veil jumper? You left with Varric. What was your name?
Rook. At least, that's the nickname Varric gave me.
Nevgalis.
Wait, I know that name. But protocol is to wait a full week before they send anyone out to look for me. I've only been gone 3 days.
Well, the situation's changed. For the worse, unfortunately. The elven gods, Elganon and Gillinane, have escaped Fen'Harel's prison. And it seems like they want to destroy the world.
Oh, yes.
You
that
cannot be
is very much
serious!
for the worse.
Characters are so poorly written that it doesn't even sound like a medieval fantasy game anymore. It honestly sounds like I'm talking to 16-year-old current generation kids. The choices of words are actually crazy. One time, my companion Tosh said, "What the crap?" or something along the lines of "Don't be a dick." This is not how they spoke in previous Dragon Age games at all, and it isn't how you speak in most RPGs that involve medieval fantasy in general. It literally kills immersion. Plot that could have been fully fleshed out, such as Harding's quest to learn more about dwarven ancestries, was just handled in a way that made you not really care at all. Harding used to be the serious person in the Inquisition, and now she's goofy. Bellara? Goofy. Emmerich, who's supposed to be a necromancer, is instead this goofy nice guy that not only has a nice way of doing necromancy, but also does not even use necromancy whatsoever in his skill sets. You can't even have random conversations with your companions like you could have in all the other Dragon Age games. No. You just have to wait for an icon to pop up over their head, then discuss something specific that they want to talk about. I mean it, guys, you can't have infinite conversations with them. You can't sit down and have that conversation like you used to back in the campfire days, where in Dragon Age Origins, or even in Dragon Age 2, where you went back to the house to talk to the companions and discuss things and events that's happened. Gone are the campfire days where you kick it back with your companions and talk about life, learn more about their past, and get closer with them. What the hell possessed them to get rid of this shit? The voice acting here is not that great either. It feels forced. A lot of political agendas are pushed in the dialogue, almost in a way of teaching you today's issues. The voice acting, at times, you can hear that it's forced, as the feeling of the dialogue at times just isn't there at all. To make matters worse, I have suspicions of some of the dialogue being formed from AI, but that could just be a theory. There were times where it just felt really flat on their delivery. Here's the problem with Rook now, aka the person that you get to play. Your character, the protagonist, is the worst iteration in the franchise, often feeling like a hired therapist with your companions, solving minor problems about identity and minor arguments about what things to pack for a goddamn camping trip. Ah, my gosh, man, no, seriously, guys, these are the plots and dialogue you'll be faced with. Rook is boring beyond measure because your dialogue wheel is practically non-existent. A dialogue wheel is essentially the thing that we use in games like Mass Effect. It started in Dragon Age 2, really, where you get decisions that you can make, or like options of dialogue that you can make, usually portraying or invoking the type of character you wanted to play as. Well, in here, the dialogue wheel is practically non-existent. You are a bona fide yes man who says yes to everything in 3 different ways. One is in a nice way, the second one is a slightly less nice way, and the third one is an even less nice, but still nice way. You have 0 disagreements, you challenge nothing, your dialogue options barely have any weight to them, which results in not caring about the story much. It makes it even more difficult to replay this game because everything just feels the same in the dialogue. Rook has close to no personality, and unless you are playing a cookie cutter good guy, you cannot play as anything else or pretend to be anything else but that. Previous Dragon Age games gave you the opportunity to be aggressive or be sarcastic and funny. You were able to intimidate a person or persuade them in a dialogue choice and changing the whole flow of the game. It's not even about the choice either. It's more so about the feeling or seeing your character that you made act the part or act like how you made them. There are very few choices to make in the game that have actual impact. The options that do have impact you only make in the last segments of the game. The game spits in the face of fans of the previous Dragon Age games because they do not mention almost anything about the previous games. Your Inquisitor is absolute cheeks because they get almost no screen time whatsoever and doesn't matter at all unless you are a female elf that romance Solus. Everything about the Inquisition is gone. Everything that you knew, all of the companions that you knew, everyone is gone except for Dorian and Solus. That's it. Everyone else is gone. What happened to Cassandra? No one knows. What happened to Liliana, which is probably the best, one of the most powerful written characters in the Dragon Age lore, is gone. Nothing is left. It is all stripped out of the game. Everything has been stripped out of the lore. The Antivan Crows were once extremely terrifying assassins involved in horrible acts and did anything for the money.
Now that you mention it, I am not entirely certain. To be truthful, I didn't even know the Crows existed when I joined them. I was but a boy of 7 when I was purchased, for 3 sovereigns, I'm told, which is a good price, considering I was all ribs and bone and didn't know the pommel of a dagger from the pointy end. The Crows buy all their assassins that way. Buy them young, raise them to know nothing else but murder, and if you do poorly in your training, you die. Of course. You compete against your fellow assassins, and those who survive are rightfully proud of it.
Well, it turns out there are actually freedom fighters now who wants what's best for the people of Antiva. The Lords of Fortune, who are supposed to be pirates that steal, turns out to be just a crew of people that lost relics and returns them to their rightful owners. Necromancers are even like actual necromancers at all. The Grey Wardens take the biggest backseat of all time and gets treated like absolute trash yet again. In this case, at this point, like they can't even batter them down. It's like beating a dead horse. Yo, seriously, man, this game has no shades of gray at all. Either you are evil or good. There is no in between. You and your team are the good guys, and that only does good, and the people you are up against are evil incarnate. Nothing else in between. The antagonists are just villains to be villains. The typical I just want power to turn the whole world into a blight is shown here everywhere. They have zero personality and evidently zero battle tactics because somehow you manage to get away from the gods every single encounter. Now, what I find absolutely criminal is the beautification of everything the lore has presented. What I mean by this is things like the slavery of elves, the racism that occurs between factions are all gone. The political intrigue that this world once had so much of, the impact with things like demons are all gone. I mean, demons are in the game, but they're just something else for you to hit. Demons used to be the most absolute tricksters of the mind, man. Often blurring the lines between psychosis and actual struggle with magic, where you almost aren't sure whether someone is being plagued by an actual demon or just succumbing to some form of mental illness, especially due to the strife and anguish a lot of people used to get as mages, as being a mage or being born a mage. In Inquisition, we had an entire story dedicated to fighting that's happened between Templars and mages, and yet the game does absolutely nothing to reference this. Elves, who were once slaves in slums and cities, are now just in the same groups as humans without any explanation whatsoever as to how this conflict was resolved. The dwarves are absolutely neglected yet again in its entirety and is referenced only by a small group of them with zero relevance to Orzammar. The Qunari, once a faction with a lot of lore, have been reduced to nothing but a bunch of bad guys called the Antam. All of them, once again, have masks on, so you have no idea what they look like. Everything is watered down to the point where it all just face value now. There's no more digging for information. There's no more finding out new pieces of lore or getting better understanding of the systems and how this world works. Instead, they essentially set the game up for this soft reset of speak. I mean, the story and narrative of this game truly brings this game to its knees, crippling in its entirety, because a lot of what you do in this game is dialogue and they ruin it. Imagine ruining this part of an RPG. So it wasn't enough that you took a steaming shit on the combat. You decided that you were going to go ruin the story too? Are you serious? Man, no. 5 out of 20 for this. The story, it sucks. We move on to the visuals and art direction. Starting with the pros, actually, I must say, this game is stunning in terms of its graphical quality and the lighting. It takes full advantage of the current generation of hardware, ray tracing, volumetric lighting effects, excellent use of DLSS, FSR, and frame generation. Environmental design is incredible and set pieces are well done. Animation quality is excellent when it comes to the physical motion such as running, climbing, attack animation skills, the dodges, and the block animations. Unfortunately, the facial motion capture could have used a lot more work, especially since it's doing so much talking that you really start to see and notice the lack of facial qualities. But everything else is good in terms of animations. I guess I see where the money went to because they didn't miss a beat here in terms of the graphical quality. Extensive character creation allows for a solid amount of customization. There's a few controversies here and there, such as the top surgery scars and musculature of the characters. But for the most part, I was able to make some cool characters, to be honest. I just wish they had better dialogue so I could have enjoyed them more. That story really bogged it down, but the character design itself I thought were pretty okay. Large variety of armors, about 100 different pieces, and a transmog system gives this game a good visual feedback as well as an aesthetic for your character. Not just the armor pieces, but also the weapon pieces, designs of them as well. Now it's time for the cons. The main con here is right in your face. It's actually the art direction. It's clear what they were going for here, and it's clear that they were going for this Pixar tone for this game, just giving off the dialogue alone, but the art direction solidifies it. Does not match the tone of Dragon Age franchise in the slightest, and so it will detract from the story even further for some players. I was able to get used to the art direction, and it would have worked if they had went more deep or darker with the story and the dialogue. The combination of both this art style and the dialogue exponentially makes this aspect of the visuals worse. This game has absolutely no blood and gore whatsoever in it. Once again, the game went for a squeaky clean art style, so blood was just a no-no for them. This is a rated M for mature game, by the way, and no blood. They made sure to go out of their way to get that automatic rated M for mature for their game by showing nudity, literally just so they can show off the surgical top star, because other than the character creation screen, there are no places where there are nudity in the game at all. But blood and gore is where they cross the line. Ah well. Despite those issues, however, this category gets 11 points out of 15. Moving on to audio design, the pros of this is that it's a good overall soundtrack. It fits the theme of the situation that you're in as the player, with the exception of a few Pixar music moments. That includes different music for combat, large epic scenes, visual shots, and certain eerie or bleak environments. Sound effects for weapons are satisfying, such as when you hit with your weapon or using spells. Spell sound is very good and match the spell or ability that you're using. I actually have no major problems with this category of the game at all. Everything seemed fine and nice and well designed in terms of the audio. It's not all perfect, however, since I said before, they have multiple instances where they bring in some of their soundtracks from Disney and make a nice little Pixar skit for us to all skip and dance to. Voice acting is subpar in my opinion. Once again, I have to mention it because it is audio. I kind of stress how bad some of this voice acting is, and the only reason why I can't fully blame it on audio is that it was because of the story, but I stopped to mention it here. And so with the audio category, this gets an 8 points out of 10. Which brings us to technical performance. Technical performance is such an important thing this day and age, where every game either comes out busted, broken, missing parts, early access, or straight up optimized. Before we even get into it, I run a 4090 paired with a 7800X3D, so keep this in mind when discussing this part of the review. I also run it on a 4K resolution monitor, but my little brother plays as well, and he uses a 4070 in a laptop, which is equivalent to the power of maybe like a 3070 in a desktop version. Usually with laptops, the power is like one generation behind because of the power limitations that they have to impose on those GPUs to maintain heat. Anyways, on to the pros. This game actually runs very well and does not have any large frame drops whatsoever, I must say. The technical team here were on some serious payroll. I believe I ran a steady 120 to 140 frames with DLSS turned set to quality and 4K ultra settings. My brother managed to achieve about 60 to 70 frames, sometimes pushing 85 in certain situations on his 4070 laptop with settings turned to high and DLSS on balance. There's tons of customizations options for how your graphic settings can be set, alongside with FSR and DLSS options almost entirely supported. To be quite honest with you, they really support a wide range of specifications, and they also, I believe they also have Steam Deck certification. I only had one crash towards the end of the game in both of my playthroughs combined, and one moment where my controller wouldn't sync to the game, which I'm pretty sure was a me issue. Now, according to people I've asked and reviews that I've watched about the game on the consoles, reports have shown pretty good stability on there as well. This is honestly a rare occurrence and probably is the best part about this game. Technical performance category gets all 10 points out of 10. The technical performance team really knocked it out of the park here. They really made up for this game, and I'm pretty sure I know why, because they had a feeling that this was going to be a disaster, so they had to at least make it a pretty disaster. We're on to the innovation and unique features of this game. They took a risk with making this a fully action combat RPG, which pays off somewhat, as a lot of people do prefer more action-oriented combat this day and age. And now, before I get flamed by my strategy RPG lovers, I'm also a strategist personally, and I love my beloved games that employs this. However, I have to see it from a large scale of what gamers are and totally prefer, and it seems to heavily lean on action combat. And well, that's pretty much it for the pros. As for the cons, while they took a risk on action combat, they did it halfway, as stated before, and missing all the RPG elements in its entirety. This game doesn't try to do anything new, bring anything new to the table, or try to reinvent anything. It doesn't even improve on anything, only downgrades. RPG mechanics stripped, dialogue gutted, storyline pointless. This game was not only inspired by God of War, but quite literally copies so many things about it. Even the animation where you open the chest just smells like God of War. There is no innovation and no unique features at all, and when you pair it to the competition, In a world where Baldur's Gate 3, Stalker, and Cyberpunk exist, it makes this game way worse in comparison. Honestly, it's impossible not to compare because at the end of the day, these games are expensive, man, and RPGs take so much time to complete in full. A lot of people in this day, attention is easily swayed by other games because of how many games come out, so you have to come out swinging as a AAA RPG coming out this day and age, otherwise you just get left in the dust. Due to this lack of innovation, unique systems, and even risk in taking any risk whatsoever, I'm giving this category a 4 out of 10. We lastly have player engagement. This part is very interesting because on one side, if you love this game beyond measure and have nothing bad to say about it, you will find solid community pages where you can only speak nice things about the game with others, and you will be accepted for sure. As for fans who are critical of the game or have concerns about why certain decisions that shaped this game were so off-putting, you risk being banned from these platforms. The game has already dropped tremendously in its player base to the point where it's safe to assume it's a dead game. Mods are rare and the scene for modding is the lowest that's ever been for a Dragon Age series game. There is no updates for this game other than 2 bonus skins they give from the previous titles, which is the iconic Champion of Kirkwall armor and the Dragon from Dragon Age 2 and the N7 on Mass Effect. If you are looking for expansions, however, there is none. So you're most certainly shit out of luck for that one. Devs abandoned this game just as hard as they did the entire lore prior. There's likely not going to be any mini content updates akin to Baldur's Gate or Cyberpunk's update. I personally don't blame them, as this game was a massive beacon of controversy that played right into the hands of the online culture war. Sometimes I honestly wonder if they had intentions of making money because they missed the target mark EA had by such a massive margin. I'm talking millions of sales lower than expected. The game is constantly on sale now, and store shelves have boatloads of this game on them. Player engagement category gets a 2 out of 5 possible points for essentially being a dead game on arrival, and essentially a YouTube meme for tons of people to essentially shit on the game. It's unfortunate that it even got to that point, but it is what it is. So this concludes us to a total of gameplay 10 points, story 5 points, visual 11 points, audio 8 points, technical 10 points, innovation 4 points, and player engagement 2 points, for a total of 50 points. This score represents this game perfectly. The score simply shows that the game is just average or just okay. The problem here is that it was a 10-year long dev cycle from a beloved AAA studio with tons of money and staff making a game way more inferior than many games made with 10% of their staff. I'm honestly truly disappointed, and it really shows here. After all, I had to make this review just for this game almost out of frustration with what these RPGs are becoming now. There is insane focus on graphical fidelity to a point where they will throw all the resources in the furnace for graphics and have very little time or funding for everything else that matters. This game failed the fans in such a painful way. Imagine looking at your fan base and all of the things they enjoy about your game and literally taking every bit out of it, one bit by bit, out of the game. Imagine coming up with a shit storyline that has 0 sense behind it and tank level plot armor, stripping all the strategy, all the decision making, all the crafting, all the detail and love and care. This game leaves a burn mark on the fan base, essentially crucifying us, and for what? I don't get why they would even go in this direction at all. I don't get why you would target essentially us as your enemy and look for a new audience to treat. I have watched countless reviews and many of them felt the same way as I had, but there were so many that were praising things that I couldn't even believe, such as the combat or even the story. This was a terrible ending to a saga, and there's a chance they kill Dragon Age here altogether. I don't think the once Dragon Age fans will ever forget this. I sure as hell won't. The worst part about all this, that it sucks any hope I had left for their next title, which I believe is Mass Effect 5, but I'm pretty sure they're going to screw that up too. This agenda is going too far. But let me know what you guys think. What did you think of the game? Was I too harsh or critical of its mechanics? Do you think Bioware could come back from this failure? If you made it to the end of this video, I want to give a sincere thank you for chiming in and listening to my review. These reviews are long, but such is the way of the RPG genre. To give a proper review of an RPG, I feel like we have to delve into these factors so that you can make an executive decision on a purchase, or whether you want to, give up your time for this game. It's really the time for me because I believe we all, couldn't at least be able to buy the game. It's just a matter of, do I want to put the time investment into this game as well, because that is also a cost factor a lot of people do not consider. Love it if you all could leave a like and subscribe for more updates and content. Also greatly help this YouTube algorithm so that more people can see this video like you. I hope to build a nice steady community around this genre where we can discuss topics and speak our point of views about several things. We can do other things such as commentaries on games, builds, tutorials and games like that if you guys are having difficulty. I also specialize in being able to come up with nice PC builds that can help you with certain games if you have any questions of those. Stay safe, you all. RPG Shactics is out.